Hey folks, Annette Evans of On Her Own here again with Lee and the Obscene Sailor. We have been for a couple of weeks now exploring what it means to be safe in the relationship game, starting from swiping left and swiping right and moving on to getting into a serious relationship and that sort of long-term flow of what it means to communicate, also communicate and how that interacts with your personal safety, not just in terms of physical safety, which is of course very important, but also your emotional and mental safety. But now we've got to get into perhaps the toughest material, and we want to warn you now that this is going to be a really, really difficult episode that you might not want to listen to. And I'm going to create the sin of content creators and say maybe you need to turn this off if you've had a traumatic end to a relationship, or if you're in a relationship that you're afraid is going to end that way. This might not be the episode for you, or it might not be the episode for you right now and you need to come back to it. That said, we're going to start on a high note because it's not always bad when it's over. Friendly partings are possible.
Um, with that gigantic disclaimer out of the way, episode 3 and all of our talk on communication and building communication norms are the best thing in the world for friendly partings.
Yep.
Um, and defining a friendly parting, there's always going to be hurt there. It's, in my eyes, minimizing the maliciousness that we have towards our previous partner. Even if it's the friendliest of partings, you don't need to get lawyers involved. You walk into the courthouse having already split up your stuff. You know, there's still going to be hurts. There's still going to be moments that perhaps you slip into the other two um, that we're going to cover of normal, of normal partings. Annette, you have way more experience with this one than I do, though, because mine was not particularly friendly. What are friendly partings to you, and what gets a couple there?
I mean, I think in my case, neutral is probably a better word for our parting, but we did we didn't have big fights over who's taking what, who's taking which cat. It was sort of a mutual decision on, who's getting what stuff. I agreed to move out. I offered that up front so that it wasn't a fight, who was getting what assets. And a lot of that is, I think, there's this temptation sometimes in some relationships to kind of get a little revenge on your way out the door. That can make it really, really hard to return to a friendly or a neutral relationship down the road, because throwing those last barbs might feel good in the moment, but they hurt especially more. And I think that that kind of can poison the well. I do think sometimes of, other relationships I've seen end and be really friendly, particularly when kids are involved and the parents have decided and committed to the fact that they really they're really focused on what they believe to be best for their child. And unfortunately, it does mean splitting up, but it doesn't mean using the child as a pawn between them, fighting over custody, fighting over, things related to that relationship. And I've seen them become so friendly, and that, you know, the ex-spouses and their new partners all get along with each other and are friendly with each other, whether it's a civil, we can say hello and ask how they're doing and comment about the weather when we're trading custody, or we actually spend time together as a full and complete family. Not every arrangement is right for every family or every couple, but it's possible and it's okay. Don't feel like you have to, for whatever reason, hate your ex. It's not necessary. There might be really good reasons that you're parting. You've just discovered something doesn't work for you or doesn't work for you at that time. And as Lee said, all of that communication work that you've put in may have helped you come to that sad conclusion of, hey, we just we can't do this anymore. It's not right for you or for me, or for one of us to do this anymore. How can we move on with our lives in the most productive way possible? And sometimes, you've gone through some of this other stuff and you have to return there and it takes a lot more work, but have some hope, I think, and have some realization that you don't have to, nobody has to be a bitch on their way out the door. And sometimes it can be really beautiful and really productive to work really hard on saying, hey, we're over as partners, but we're not over as even friends.
And making another callback to episode 3, the reason that my divorce was not friendly was we didn't have that communication up front of I didn't get to watch my partner be unhappy. I didn't get any exposure to her working over the idea that maybe she wanted a divorce. And that communication aspect, absolutely. And this is going to sound terrible, but it is genuinely long term for the best. If you're unhappy with your partner, if you're thinking about ending a relationship, tell them. Let them have a say in the direction that a potential split is going to go, as well as maybe fixing it. And we're going to get into that maybe fixing it a little later on. On to the hard one, I think.
Yeah,
The
there's no easy way to ease into it.
No, actually, there is. Our friend Sarah, who we color coordinated in her gear today without meaning to, posted a fantastic article about her split from a former partner who had been physically, emotionally, financially abusive. Um, she covered the legal aspect, she covered the psychological aspect, she covered everything. And if that is something that you're worried about on either side of the gender split, men, you're just as likely to run into this one. It's really worth a read. I will warn that it is a very, very difficult read. Even if you've never experienced it, dangerous partings are, on a lot of levels, terrifying.
Yes. And they happen for all sorts of reasons, right? Sometimes we see dangerous partings, we can see them a mile away, right? You're especially for those who are leaving physically abusive partners. Like the statistically, that is the most dangerous time in someone's life is when they're leaving a physically abusive partner, somebody who's already started hitting them, who's already started beating them, or finding other ways to physically hurt them. So you can kind of see that coming, and that's where a lot of that fear of leaving comes from. But I think that there's also those dangerous partings that's the spark. Maybe there was an emotional or mental abuse component. There usually is, although those I think are a little bit harder to define and to see, especially if you've been living with it for a very long time. Sometimes it just literally comes out of nowhere, or nowhere that you could have predicted without the benefit of clear hindsight, which is one of the reasons that even if you believe a friendly parting is happening or anything else, it's good to know that these things can occur and have that sort of in the back of your head of, is this part of my risk analysis? Like, let's decide, is this really likely going to happen? Because if you don't think about the possibility, you can't dismiss it in an intelligent way. And then you can maybe make some small preparations. On her own, I'm big about the small prep. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Like maybe it's just you don't give your new address to your ex. You tell them to send the mail somewhere else. Or just email me anything that you get for me. It's not a big thing out of your life, but it can keep you very much safer from a parting that turns dangerous unexpectedly.
And I think it's important to acknowledge the dangerous parting may not necessarily come from your partner. Um, I have a family member whose wife is currently going through a psychiatric episode, and that has caused said family member to have to deal considerably more with her family. And they are having their issues, but the family is considerably more. The new boyfriend may decide that he needs to prove that he's tougher than you to establish his credentials in the new relationship. The friends may decide that they need to get their quips in, and just like social violence outside of relationships has a tendency to escalate, this is a very, very personal aspect to a lot of people. Um, I speaking firsthand to like this little much of that risk in the course of my divorce, living in the same town as my ex and a bunch of her friends, I was worried that one of them was going to have something that they needed to prove, um, which took what was otherwise a fairly neutral divorce and really drove home that there are aspects of danger in every parting, every end of a relationship, but it's not always going to look like an abusive partner. It may be other aspects. Um, we hit in episode one about needing financial, emotional get outs. I hope before your parting that you have that, preferably before the relationship, so that your partner never has to know that you've got a bag stored at a friend's place with clothes that fit and everything that you need to disappear. But the financial piece is absolutely real and is a major hangup for a lot of people. Um, being able to grab your stuff and go has a merit of its own, especially if there's any concern from anyone involved about a potentially dangerous parting.
It may not happen. The odds are, higher in some areas than others. They do happen, and it's important to acknowledge that they happen and prepare for their happening. But I think at the same time, you don't need to assume that that's going to be the case. It's this balance of being ready for it and not being afraid of it. And one of the ways that you cannot be afraid of it, as Lee says, is to have the tools to make it not a problem. If you have that bank account ready to go and you don't need to, like, it would be awful nice if we could split our joint bank account and I could get my stuff and everything else. But I have that safety net of being able to take my bank account, get a new place, buy a mattress from IKEA and be done. Then that's going to make you safer, even if it's a friendly split. And maybe it's a friendly split, but you want to save everybody the pain, you want to get out faster. Being ready for a dangerous split lets you do that. It lets you be kinder because you don't have to be as desperate.
And being ready for a dangerous split, um, in the course of my divorce, one of the first things that I did was remove all but two firearms from the house, um, set up security cameras in the house that logged me coming and going, um, and not for the obvious reason of, oh my god, I'm worried about somebody breaking in, but entirely because I wanted proof that I was home. Because you're going to be, the unfortunate happens, something happens to your previous partner. Men, I'm sorry, you're the immediate, they think you did it, um, as well as false incrimination, like false reporting. Um, everything, not the lawyer in this conversation, but Everything should be in writing with the minimum amount of emotion, and having records to prove this is what happened, and um, keeping everybody on the up and up. Um, I I have a solid year logs saved off of me coming and going in and out of my house because I wanted to be able to prove when I was home. Um, it is the physical violence part is gigantic. The false reporting, the he said, she said, and the um, that aspect can be just as dangerous and just as life impacting.
Sometimes they grow into the physical violence. I have in my notes another type of parting is the acrimonious parting. It's not that it gets physically violent, it's that there's just a lot of barbed comments and there's a lot of yelling and screaming. There's a lot of nastiness going back and forth. And, I'm not going to talk about blame and who's at fault and, getting your own back or anything like that. But A, those have the potential to boil over into physical violence. And B, one of the reasons that you should consider not contributing to that isn't about who's right, who's wrong, who everything else. It's because being kinder puts you ahead. It puts you ahead if there's a court case. It puts you ahead if, there's some allegation of violence or something like that. And it also puts you ahead in being able to build that fence and boundary around yourself of getting it back. Some of those barbs and some of those nasty words, they're a two-way conversation. And not always, but sometimes you not participating in it doesn't give them something to come back to you with. And that's a matter of your own emotional safety and your mental safety to not have to hear that. You may be boiling and ranting and angry, and I encourage you to call up one of your sympathetic friends and just yell and scream and get angry about that. But not directing it at your ex is all about not getting it back at you.
As a wonderful comedic interlude to a very difficult conversation, my ex drove a white Chevy Impala. I know because I spent during the course of our relationship a lot of time working on that car. And without realizing it, I had developed a habit of giving the finger to every single white Chevy Impala that I passed. Turns out there's a lot more of them that you don't notice until you're looking for them. And I would just very casually, you know, every time I would pass one, and that was fine. That was me processing it in my way until I was on my motorcycle and I'm sitting at a stoplight into Tucson traffic, midday. There's a lot of people around, and I just to a white Chevy Impala, and everyone is looking at me on the motorcycle because they can see me going, "What is his problem? What is wrong with him?" There is a time and a place to express your anger, your grief, your loss, and it's all valid regardless of the type of parting that it is. It can be the friendliest parting in the world, and then something happens and you're a little disgruntled with your ex, and that's valid.
Probably why they're your ex.
I take that as a sign. Don't try it again. But if you express that in the wrong way, I had articulated online in one of the forums that I participate in that I was really, in the course of my divorce, really, really worried that I was going to end up needing to pepper spray my former father in law, who's a man that I really liked, but who is capable of violence, or one of my ex's friends. That is it. That is an abject analysis of what the threat in my life looked like at that point. It was not the correct time or place to say it because I'm joking about it, laughing about it, going, ha, I never liked that asshole anyway. But perception is that is me fantasizing about hurting people close to my ex. There's a time and a place to say these things to get the best end result for you and to minimize your negative outcomes.
Right. There's a lot of debate in the self-defense world about things like complying with the mugger, right? So that you don't anger them. And it's really hard to predict with stranger violence how your actions will be read by them and how they will decide that this is why they're going to kill you or this is why they're going to hurt you. With your ex-partner, you know. You know every little button that you can press. Why press them? It might feel good in the moment. Sure, I absolutely acknowledge that I am with you on that temptation. But you also know what the potential outcomes are. And what you might not know is under the stress of the relationship ending, how much more in various ways, whether it's verbally or physically, that reaction might be. So it's not about appeasing them to make them happy and to be a nice girl or be a nice guy. It's about not creating opportunities for more violence because we want this to be friendly, especially if there are kids or pets or mutual acquaintances, mutual friends in the mix. We don't want this to become, I don't want to say uncomfortable for anybody because we're not here to make people comfortable necessarily, but to have a fallout that is less than optimal. Like, really, you don't want to have to shoot somebody or pepper spray somebody or stab somebody that you knew, that you love, or that you once loved. You might think that you do, but everybody I know who has been involved in a self-defense incident involving a loved one or a former loved one will tell you how difficult that is emotionally. So this is all about trying to avoid getting to that point. And
The
being able to navigate it this way, that's sometimes how we get to the neutral outcome.
and talking about navigating a former partner in that wonderful gray middle time frame of you're probably going to see their Tinder profile. Um, your we talked in episode 1 about the uncertainty and the everything that is to do with finding somebody new. You're dealing with them doing that potentially while you're doing that while your relationship is ending. Um, I don't know very many who don't end a relationship and immediately start at least looking. I know that I did because I needed to feel like life was going to be okay. Um, it's not just your stressors on your previous partner, and you can say some terrible things that turn around and make them take risks that maybe they shouldn't.
Mhm.
Insulating yourself from their bad decisions should be the primary goal. Insulating yourself from them needs to be the biggest thing.
And sometimes being able to do that gets over the hump of the immediate stress. You know, they, they like to say time heals all wounds, and I'm not actually sure that's true, but I think that it does create a distance from, that the things that are scattered in your shared living space start to go away, the smells start to go away, the memories start to go away. And if you can get through that period that it takes for that to happen, you can come out on the other side with that friendly parting that we started with, or at least a neutral ground where, maybe you can show up at the same party and just politely ignore each other or politely say hello and move on. These are possible outcomes, and they're things that I think in this world that are good for us. It's one less enemy that we have in the world if you want to be entirely pragmatic, but it's also, you're putting out a life where I'm not just leaving behind people. I am moving on from people to have a better life for me, for them to have a better life. But you got to do this stuff in the short term so that you can get to that neutral or get to that friendly.
And the reality of this is that for the vast majority of relationships ending, I think you're kind of going to switch between every single type of relationship. Sorry, of every single type of parting that's possible. Um, you're going to potentially try and make it work. You know, your partner may tell you, "I want a divorce." Okay, well, can we at least try and marriage counseling, whatever the case may be? Um, you're going to fluctuate back and forth between the friendly, the oh my god, I'm worried that they're going to call the cops because I pissed them off, the very neutral, like, okay, just a resignation that this is the route that it's going to go. And you're going to go straight back to episode one. Oh my God, I'm so excited for this person because I love them and it's going to be fine. In some cases, by the hour. Um, navigating that, um, I can't say that it gets easy. I can't even say that that is the most difficult thing that I've ever done. Um, understanding that your emotional state is going to make you compromised. Maybe it's a good idea, not just for the legal implications, not just because, oh my God, they may call the cops. Maybe it's a good idea to remove the guns from the house entirely
Right.
because um, suicide happens. And to be honest, maybe you're not making the best decisions.
Mhm.
As someone who rides a motorcycle because of my midlife crisis post divorce, um, maybe it's a good idea to put the keys to the sports car somewhere that you're not taking risky decisions because you just need something as a pick me up. Um, same with drinking. Same with if your state is recreational or medicinal. Um, we make dumb decisions when we are emotionally compromised, and you're going to be emotionally compromised regardless of what kind of relationship you're in. Dudes, I know that you're going to go out and try and drown in lady parts. Maybe it's a good idea to not. And I say that recognizing the irony that I immediately started dating after my divorce. Do as I say, not as I do. It can get very unhealthy. And navigating this with grace is very difficult. The best way I've found is to remove the temptation and the dumb things that we can do to prove that we don't need them anymore.
I think to follow on from that, especially the do as I say, not as I do, is to remember to, even if we make the dumb decisions, even if this goes badly or it goes well, that's how we become who we are today. And that's how we become ready for that next partner or that next non-partner, just the next friend in our life, or that phase when we're going to be gloriously single. We don't get there without having gone through all of this. Being in a relationship with bad communication has taught me so much about good communication and how insistent I need to be for it. Being in, coming from worlds where other problems have been an issue. You learn to recognize it. You learn to be stronger. You learn to be more empathetic. You learn to be more demanding of what you need. You learn to be more certain in yourself so that when you step into that next relationship, you know what are your boundaries now? What are your demands? What are your, go no goes? You have to go through these, and I know that sucks. I mean, Lee and I think, can share all the reasons that that sucks, but also how that is the only reason we are where we are today.
I and episode 3 had a very different tone to it from episode 1 and 2. It wasn't because they were shot on different days. It wasn't because um, it's because we both went through all of the growth and like the things that we harped on as important to us to make relationships work is because we didn't have those things. It gets better. As cliche as that sounds, as
Yes.
stereotypical, if you're listening to this in the middle of staring down the end of a relationship or you're currently going through it, 2 years on, I can promise you it gets better.
Same.
Um, you're going to find things out about yourself you didn't know existed, um, good and bad, but it gets better.
Sure does. I want to wrap this with we Lee just mentioned we recorded these episodes on a couple of different days. These are all pre-recorded, not live, obviously. But we want to invite you, if there's topics that you'd like us to expand on, questions that you have, please let us know. We're going to get together one final time after the last episode and talk about them, answer your questions, talk about the things that you want expanded about. And if there's particular topics that we think need even more time, we'll come back and revisit those as well. So please let us know what it is that we can help you with, both from our experience and from what we've learned from other sources, and how to keep yourself safe in these most intimate relationships in your life. Any final words, Lee?
If you've made it through all 4 episodes, if you've sat there and went, huh, if you've found yourself asking questions, as someone who does not do this side of my life in any way, shape, or form professionally, please like Annette's page on her own. Um, Share the videos, generate conversation because this stuff is important. Um, no one prepares us for these aspects of relationships. We're taught the Disney princess, you're going to fall in love and everything works out. Um, Annette, thank you so much for having me. This has been, as someone who's fairly just a shit poster anymore for gun related content, this has been one of the best times I've had generating very, very difficult content. Um, for everybody who tagged along, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing what you guys have as far as questions, content you want expanded on. And I think it'll be a great time.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Thank you to everybody who's been with us on this ride. We hope to see more of you soon.